Hi everybody, welcome back to the Global Acceleration Programme. I'm Ruben, and as I think by now you know, I'm here to remind us of where we are in our GAP journey, to introduce our two expert speakers for today, and I'll be hanging around as well to facilitate the Q&A at the end of the session. And as I say at the start of all of these, please do make the most of the fact that we are live. We have two really insightful experts with us today. So please do ask questions as we go. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen you're watching at the moment. If you click on that, you'll see a bar opens up, type in your question and press the blue button. So as we go, do ask those questions and I'll bring them to our speakers. So where are we in our journey for the Global Acceleration Programme? As this week is about identifying the right markets for us to export to. If you remember, on Tuesday, we had Jessica take us through the first of our two sessions in terms of market identification, which gave us a really detailed foundation for our international growth plan, looking at the 5 pillars for our export plan. And again, hopefully giving us the opportunity between then and now to really focus on what success looks like for us, what our winning aspiration is. And with that in mind, today we're going to get insanely practical and dive straight into deciding which markets are going to be have the most potential for us to export into, and then we are going to validate some of those choices by just double checking and sanity checking that they are right for us and they'll do the job we need them to do. Now, as I said, we have two expert speakers on hand today to do exactly that. First of all, in a moment, I'm going to welcome Marco from Google, who's going to take us through how to get the most out of the Google's Market Finder tool to identify those markets that have the most potential for our international growth, before Marco then hands on to Jessica once again, who's going to again take us through an exclusive model that's been put together for this program to help validate those choices, just to make sure that those markets are going to help us grow. So without any further ado, let's dive into the practical expert content for today. I'd like to welcome Marco. Thank you very much for your time today, Marco. Tell us, how do we find where we should be exporting to?
Thank you, Ruben. Hi, everyone. Hi from Italy. My name is Marco Giorgini. I'm the lead of vertical platforms and in the international growth team at Google. Very pleased to be here today. Today, we will talk, as Ruben said, about market identification. But before I do that, I wanted to share a short story about me. It relates to market identification indeed. It's about my little company that I ran in between my consulting experience and Google. Since the start of my career, I always had a great passion for the internet. And at some point, I decided that I wanted to own a company and run my own e-commerce. So I didn't know what to sell. I was in Italy and I thought, let's do fashion. So we managed to bring a couple of designers on board, and we found the right suppliers, and then we started producing and selling these crazy T-shirts and bow ties, wooden bow ties. Online sales were not going very well. I was surviving, staying afloat mostly with retail sales. But as you know, retailers charge a very, very high commission. So after 3 years, costs were too high, the margin were too small, and I had to shut down the company. Even though the sales were good enough, but my go-to-market strategy was wrong. I had a bias about Italy being the market with the highest potential for fashion product. I didn't know that Turkey, at that time, was the market with the highest online potential for ties, and also was the market with the lowest level of online competition. And I will tell you more about this later. I also didn't know that Germany was the market with the highest online potential for T-shirts. I also didn't know Italians that well. I wasn't offering cash on delivery as a method of payment. And at that time in Italy, there was a lot of skepticism around paying with credit cards online. So it was a small business, wrong go-to-market strategy, and in these cases, you're very likely to fail. So do not make my mistakes. No, do not have biases and assumptions in this exercise. This exercise that we will show you today is all about data and facts. So with that, we go to the goals for today's sessions. Number one, in the previous sessions, you already started thinking about your markets. You may have an idea already of your top 5, top 10 markets. And today I want to give you the elements to get that list finalized. And after this, from the next sessions, you will start thinking about how to enter into these markets, how to plan your entrance, and how to be ready for the retail sales peaks coming very soon. Goal number 2, this is more the how to get to goal number 1. So we will gain access to Google Market Finder. It's a public tool available to everyone, free tool. And then after me, there will be Jessica taking over, and Jessica will show you another tool, the scorecard, and that's the tool that was created only for the participants of this program. So I want to connect back this session to the strategic choice cascade framework that you have seen in the last session. So the last time you talked about, as Ruben said, your winning aspiration, and that includes your mission and your objectives. And today we will be deciding the international markets where we want to expand. No, we will also look at some important customer insights, such as what kind of method of payments they prefer, what kind of customer service channels they would like to use if they have any pre-sales or post-sales customer inquiries, and much more than that. So the agenda for today. So one slide just to give you the basics for your market assessments, and then we will jump into the tool. There will be a live demo, and forgive me in advance. Usually with live demos, there is always something that goes wrong. I hope it's not the case today. So I show you how to use the tool. The tool is very comprehensive. There are 350 guides, articles, and dozens of metrics. So we will not see all of that, but I'll give you the how to explore the tool. And then Jessica, as I said, will take over and will help you understand the potential for the selection of markets and also feasibility. And all of that will basically move a short list of 3 markets to the next level of your planning process. So the basics of your market assessment. When thinking about potential, there are many questions that come to mind. Now, the first one, the most important: how many customers will I be able to reach? How many potential customers do I have in these new markets? Do these customers have the right purchasing power to buy my products? Are my products ready to be sold and marketed in these new markets? These are all very good questions, and today we want to find an answer for these questions. But there is also a next step, and that's feasibility, and that's a more difficult question because that requires an extensive investigation, and some of that you will have to carry on your own, especially when it comes to legal implication, tax implication. One size doesn't fit all. So we will talk about these things today, but not extensively. You will have to carry some research on your own. But what I would suggest you for the purpose of the exercise today, use some common sense. For example, you would see when we will play with Market Finder that the US or Brazil or India, large markets with a very high population, usually come in the top 3, top 5 of the ranking. Why? Because there are just many people there searching for stuff. And you would see that we use search demand as a criteria to define potential. But you have to be also more practical. Now you have to, let's say, interpret the data, because location proximity is also very important. Now it's going to be easier for you if you are in Austria to start selling in Germany or in Switzerland. No, it's going to be easier for you to understand the logistics and the legalities. So think about location proximity as well. And yeah, so in the next slide, we are going to basically start identifying the markets with Market Finder. So as I said, now this is the first step. We're going to get some KPIs to make the final decisions and to make your investment decisions as well. And now it's time to play with the tool. So I'm going to swap into my browser. And this is the homepage of Market Finder, very simple. It's asking you to enter your URL. And for the purpose of this exercise, I will use gmondo.com. It's a website. There is also a specific journey. If you have an app, or if you want to see if you also have an app, you can click here and you will basically be redirected to a different journey that is using different data from App Annie, which is one of our partner here. But I use gmondo.com. Most of you are retailers, so you probably have a website as your core brand or e-commerce channel. So what happened in those few seconds is that Market Finder was scanning Gmondo's website to understand what was inside that. No, what were the categories, the products or services that Gmondo has. And in this case, it's a very good understanding, because the categories that you see here, fitness classes, sport instructions, and so on, they are very spot on. But we may not get it right. This is just a suggestion. So we may, for example, remove some categories, or we may add a few more by searching here. We have more than 3,000 categories. So I can assure you we can be very, very specific. Even if you are in a very small and niche industry, I'm very, very likely you will find your product category there. So assuming I'm happy with the categories, I'm going to move to the next steps. And here you see what we call a first light report. So you see a heat map. Now you can see already which are the markets with the highest potential. The top 3 markets are here on top: the US, Japan, and the UK. You can see some metrics here, and these are very important metrics, because those are the metrics that we use to define and rank markets. I'm going to give you some details on those. So monthly searches across categories. This is the most important indicator for demand. The more people are searching for products within the categories that we selected in the previous step, the higher the potential for this market. But now we have to take into account other factors as well. For example, the Google Ads recommended bid. Why is this important? Because for us, this is a sign of competition. If you know Google Ads, you know that the more the bidders in one specific category, the higher the price for it. So the less bidders we have, the lower the competition. So you may want to find the right balance between having enough demand, but not so much competition, because it's going to be very hard for you to compete and bid on those keywords. The third metric is the household net disposable income. And obviously that's an important sign of purchasing power. No, we want to target markets with high demand, but also with a reasonable purchasing power. And obviously, depending on the product you have, now if you sell luxury products, you want to look at that metric very, very much. The number 4 metric is the ease of doing business. That's an index. It's an external source from the World Bank. And that's, I would say, a good summary of how easy it is to do business in that market. The lower the number, the easier it is. So this is just the first report, as I said, but there is much more, and I'm going to show you some of it. So in order to move to the next step, I need to register. Again, this is just a free tool, but we need to get a registration for that. So here we have what we call the full report. So the full list of markets, and now I'm able to select the markets that I want to bring to the next level, and the markets that I want to basically dive deeper into in terms of metrics, in terms of operational challenges, in terms of marketing support. So let me pick Japan, the US, and a smaller one, the Netherlands, in Europe. And remember, you will be able to change this selection anytime. So confirm. So now we have data, we have more data. We have metrics around the country, so we can see the population size, languages spoken, and this is obviously very important. If you have to localize your website, you have to know if English is a language that people are confident with, or if you need to localize in the local language. And we will see some guides on how to do that just later. You have the median age, the population breakdown by age. Obviously, now you may target a specific niche of the population. This is not taken into account because we don't know what's your target audience when you input your website. So you need to also take into account the age of the population. You can basically click on the flags and the results will show up. We have economics, economic metric. I will not go one by one. Online profile metrics. For example, the usage of Android versus iOS. You may know that Android is pretty much used across countries, and in most of the cases, probably Japan, if I remember right. Yes, Japan indeed has more iOS usage than Android, but in most of the markets, Android is probably ranking first. So you may want to take that into account if you, for example, want to develop an app and to do some advertising for that. Purchase behavior here, it's very useful data. This is telling you, for example, what device people are using to search for new products, whether it's a computer, it's a smartphone. You can see that computer is still dominating the scene here for search, but also, and especially, as we will see from the last table, for purchasing. Now, people are more comfortable just sitting on a desk and taking their wallet, taking their credit card, and purchasing services or products. The second table is also very interesting. It's telling you how people are using the internet during the purchasing stages. Now, for example, if they use the internet for comparing products, for finding inspiration, and we see that in the US, this is very prominent. And in Japan, now internet is used a lot for comparing things. And in some cases, people are using the internet for just finding, getting some information, and then going offline immediately for doing the purchase offline in a physical store. So you will find, again, lots of additional metrics here by market. I think we have around 100. I want to show you something else before I go. I want to show you the next step, which is plan your operations. So this is when I said, no, think about feasibility and not only demand. I was thinking about the barriers to enter these markets. And those are hurdles. I wouldn't say all of that are barriers, but these are hurdles because localizing a website is not translating it. It takes time, and it takes also skills and resources, payments, logistics, customer care, recruiting new people. If you have to open a new office, how do you go about finding the right talents? And tax and legal is also very important and also very complex. I want to show you a few pieces of content here. So, for example, within localization, you will find some generic guides about how to localize, how to approach the localization with a vendor. For example, you have to obviously use a vendor, or perhaps you have linguists in your company that will do the job. There is also a quiz here that you can use to understand your readiness to localize. How ready you are to give your website to an external agency and tell them, hey, yeah, I need to localize this into Japanese, for example. There are a few steps that you have to do before you make that step. Otherwise, there will be some inefficiencies in your budget. And then we have this section, localized for different countries, and you will find lots of guides in this case now, because we selected Holland and Japan and the US. We can see these guides coming up first. And in terms of content, this is obviously telling you what's the language in Japan, but also what's the formality to use. No, Japanese, no, they want to be treated with respect, no, with formality. And what's the numbering system and formats? What's the date format? What's the currency format? Where should you place the currency symbol, before or after? Should you use the comma or the dot as a separator? These are the kind of things that a Japanese customer wants to see, to feel at home, to feel that that website is a Japanese company, or is perhaps not Japanese company, but is a company who is taking care of the customer preferences in Japan. And also things to avoid, you will also find some fun facts. For example, in Japan, the number 4 is considered to be unlucky because when you pronounce it, it sounds like she, which is the same as the Japanese word for death. And also something I can relate to is never write a customer name in red because it has a negative connotation. I'm sure that this applies also to most of the countries in Europe. So that's localization. Payments. So you remember in my example, I was having an assumption about PayPal. I say, okay, PayPal, everyone knows PayPal, everyone can use it, and you can also pay with credit cards. If you don't have a PayPal account, you can still pay with credit cards. But people don't know that, and it's not easy to navigate that little step. And there are not only credit cards. We have more than 100 methods of payments worldwide. And yes, perhaps if you don't have the right method of payment, no, some clients will still use a different method of payment to pay you, but some will not. And even if it's just a small percentage of them, even if it's just a 5%, 10%, are you really willing to give up 5% of sales just because you don't have the right method of payment? I don't think so. So there is a tool here, find a payment processing provider, and that's, I think, very interesting. We built that with several external partners, and this is basically telling you 2 things. The first is what are the preferred method of payments by market. So you can see that cards are widely used. Yes, 59% in Japan, 19% in Holland, who prefer bank transfer, and we will see that. And yes, and in the US, credit cards are more used as well. So what we can see here, after selecting, for example, cards and bank transfer, we can see the providers who are offering you these options. And then by clicking to one, for example, we can see exactly who is offering what. And we can see that, for example, in Holland, Ideal is the preferred form of payment, and Iden is offering you that. And remember, 60% of Dutch people want to pay with Ideal. You should have Ideal in your website if you want to target the Dutch audience. So that's payments. I will show you something else, logistics. We have a similar micro tool under logistics. So we have some guides here. As before, we have guides by country. Similar to localizations, we have these markets guides that are telling you very useful things, such as, for example, which are the couriers that you can use. And you can find it in the section 6 of this guide, which are the most common carriers, DHL, DPD, Hermes. You may know that or not. You find the full list here, and it's pretty updated. And then what I wanted to show you is the tool. So let me go back. It's at the bottom of the page. It works in a very similar way of the payments tool. So the idea here is to help you find a logistic provider. And obviously, every logistic provider may offer different services. So warehousing, last mile, air, road freight. Let's assume I'm interested in these two. You can see a list of partners here. You also have a label here if these partners are working with us. with Google on this project. I can select Morrison, for example, and then I can see exactly who is offering what and where. So that's the logistic. Well, that's a small fraction of the logistic landing page. Talent recruitment, very similar look and feel. We have again here some insights and also some country guides that are telling you what's the, for example, the size of the workforce, what's the employment rate, the education rate, the level of English proficiency, and the cost of labor as well. And obviously, this is very important for you when you have to, create a job description and set a salary bracket. So yeah, that's some of the plan your operation area of Market Finder. Again, like below, like here, you will find like more than 300 articles. And under Market Your Business, I will not cover that today because we will talk about marketing extensively in this program. But you can see that these are the sections. We talk about strategy, we talk about analytics, we give you the how to use these tools, and obviously we talk about our search, our advertising solutions as well. So yes, that's Market Finder. Now, back to the presentation. So you now you understand how Market Finder works, and I wanted to show you the results of our fictional company, Happy Fitness, Germany, UK, and France. And Jessica will now show you how to use the scorecard to bring these 3 markets to the next level of your planning process. If you have any questions, there will be a Q&A session, as Ruben said at the end. I'll be here for you. Thank you very much, and over to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Marco. Great, so now we'll move on to assessing your Market Finder selection that Marco's just taken us through with the market scorecard. And to establish a comparison between individual markets, we recommend using the Market Entry Index. And this can be developed based on 2 components. So a potential score, which measures the attractiveness, but also a barrier score, which mentions the feasibility. And so let's take a deeper look into the scorecard so you can experience it for yourself, but also see the KPIs that sit behind how it works. So, as I mentioned before, when you have your top 3 markets that you've identified through Google Market Finder, we now want to use the scorecard to validate which of those markets are the most feasible to go into. And so if we can deep dive into the market scorecard itself, we have 6 tabs in the scorecard. So firstly, there's an introduction, and this gives you an overview about the basic steps that are included in here. We then have market selection, and there are 3 market sheets for each of the markets that you've identified in your Market Finder. And on those, you'll do individual evaluations for each of those markets. And then we also have the scorecard analysis, which helps you then kind of summarize all of the outputs for each market and identify which are the right markets to go into before starting your export plan. And I think one just important thing to note about this is before you use it for your own company, make sure that you save this down as a copy yourself. And within there, I'll take you through in a moment how you fill in the lightly colored cells that are yellow. And this will be your kind of version that you can continue to update. And so moving on to the next slide. Great. And so what you can see here is the kind of setting up for your market selection. So, in the case of Happy Fitness and Laura, she received the recommendation to either export to Germany, the UK, or France, if you can remember from Marco's output there. And so in the market selection tab, you need to type in those 3 markets at the top. You also need to think about the product category. So this is optional, but it really helps to specify what you're really assessing and which market you're looking at. And so in the case of Laura and Happy Fitness, this is sports clothing. And then lastly, you need to think about the channel that you're looking at. And so Laura chooses online. And so if we move then on to the inputs, and so onto the market input 1. And so firstly, we'll just look at Germany. And you can see that actually on the other markets, excuse me, there are France and UK at the bottom there, but we won't be populating those in the discussion today. We'll just focus on Germany for now. And to start off, Laura does populate the KPIs that she received from the Google Market Finder, which Marco shared earlier. So in this case, the monthly Google searches, which are 21 million, which you can see there. We have the Google Ads competitiveness, which is medium, and the household net disposable income, which is 55,000, as well as the ease of doing business ranking, which is 22. And then moving on to market attractiveness, which is really where it gets exciting, because you can get into the detail of all of the different measures that really help you understand the attractiveness of that market. But then also in a moment, we'll talk about the feasibility as well. And so in general, you can see the statements across the left-hand side that help you evaluate the scores that you'll ultimately be assessing that market against. Next to that, you have guidance on where to find your supporting data. So, for example, is this information that you can get internally or externally? But then also where exactly and which sources can help you find that data. And that data will be used to populate those light yellow fields on the right-hand side that I mentioned before. And so in this case, for Germany, the growth rate is between 5 and 6%. And so for Laura here, she selects medium. She has lots of partners in Germany already, and so makes that selection. For sports clothing, there are a few competitors, so she chooses medium competition. And then the Google Ads competitiveness is pre-populated, as we mentioned before, from the Market Finder data. And then lastly, Laura would need to check the Consumer Confidence Index to see whether consumers have a positive feeling towards the future and therefore are inclined to spend more money on major purchases. And really here, if the index is above 100, it's positive, and above 105, it's very positive, and anything below 100 is less than positive. And the link here and the source that we recommend using is the OECD. And it's really simple to just work through that, type in the country that you're looking at, and you can get the latest score there. So moving on to market feasibility. Firstly, we need to understand the global competitiveness index. And for Germany, this is around 82, so this scores as highly competitive. For political stability, Germany have medium stability, so the score's around 66. And in general, the market's not regulated and exports are not controlled. And so you can see here the answers to those questions in the light yellow boxes. In terms of language, there's no localization needed, as it's the same language as Austria. And also the cultures are quite alike, and so there's no necessary product changes required. And then finally, the ease of doing business ranking is currently at 22, as we mentioned before, and it's slightly improved compared to last year. And then you can also see that there's space for additional KPIs like the market size, but this is referring to your product category, in revenues and how this has grown in the last couple of years, as well as the market growth in volumes, which is a bit more tricky to figure out, and so it doesn't need to be populated, but any information that you have here that you can enter is great. And so, as I said before, we won't be looking at France and the UK, although those different markets will already have some pre-populated information, but you'll have to follow the same process for those as well. But what we can do is go to the scorecard analysis and have a look at the outputs of this. And you can see the table on the left-hand side in that chart. And what that's showing is, as a kind of result of all of the answers that Laura has populated that we've just been through, it suggests that Germany is a high go-to-market option and should be considered for export for Laura's business. And so if we jump back to the slide deck and have a look at a summary, here we go. So the market entry index shows on your scorecard which markets are go-to markets, which markets are try-to-go markets, and which markets are no-go markets. And so in the case of Happy Fitness, Laura now has the validation that she needs to enter the German market and really take that forward. And likewise with France and the UK, following that same process, entering that data, understanding that market in more detail and validating those assumptions. It gives a more clear validation, taking that 3 down to a 1 or 2 and being much more targeted about where Laura goes next. And so if we take a moment to just reflect on what we've analysed right from the beginning to looking at the scorecard, we started by looking at the questions that need to be addressed before deciding whether to enter a new market. So firstly, how attractive is the potential market for your country, and how feasible is it to enter that market, and including what barriers are included there. And so for market attractiveness, we looked at market growth over previous years and using lots of different data sources like the Consumer Confidence Index, the network of partners that you potentially already have in this market, and how competitive the market is in general, and how positive consumers are. We then looked at several factors that affect market feasibility, and so financial and political stability, regulations both on the market overall and for your products, considering factors such as export controls. But then we also established channel access for distribution for your product, to what extent localization might be needed, and how the ease of doing business in general is impacting this market, but also how it's evolving over time. And so combine the market finder with the market scorecard really gives that next level of validation, from taking your long list of potential markets down to narrowing it down to a few targets, and then further validation with the scorecard. I'll now hand back to Ruben, who will wrap, and we can go for any more Q&A.
Thank you very much, Jessica, as always, and superbly handled with the slight technical snafu there. So thank you very much. It is the joy of being live. It also means that with one eye on the clock, I appreciate that time is increasingly one of those scarce resources that we all have. So what I'm going to do, we have had a little Q&A, and actually looking on the looking on our live stream here, I think we've pretty much answered all the questions. One of the questions we did get was, how do we get to the scorecard there? Rafa, would you mind popping the slide up with the details on for the rest of the resources? Because all I wanted to do was leave you with a view of the other resources. So if you go to the resources tab on the microsite, you will see that that's how you access the thank you very much. That's how you access Google Market Finder, the scorecard. You will also see there's an on-demand session there. That's not live, but it is provided some great insight from Erica from Deloitte, who'll be helping talk us through and give us some really practical advice in terms of, as you can see, their export controls and sanctions. So if you think that's going to be quite a key part, and maybe quite a key hurdle, as Marco was talking about, in terms of your own go-to-market strategy, then that's definitely a video, an on-demand video I'd recommend. And there's also an awful lot of other guides and checklists that Erica has put together on that very subject. So with that said, thank you ever so much for joining us today. And remember, we're back on Tuesday when we start moving into the next section of our global acceleration program. Which is section number 2, where we start thinking global but acting local, and seeing what tweaks and developments we need to make to our proposition to make sure that we are on the money in terms of the markets we're entering. Thank you very much, and we will see you next week. Have a great weekend all.